Hey, what's happening, Every Nation Bryanston? Seville here, and welcome to our Every Nation Bryanston YouTube channel. I am super excited that you're here, and please do me a favor, particularly if you're tuning in for the very first time right here on our YouTube channel. Click on the link below. Let us know who you are, where you're from, and we would love to find a way to serve you wherever you are and connect you to our greater Every Nation Bryanston family. Before we get to the message today, I want to let you know of two things. Number one, I want to applaud you for your engagement throughout the Essentials series. It has been a phenomenal series, particularly as we have gathered in person as a church and really delved deeper in the foundations of what it means to be followers of Jesus, what it means to be a disciple. I want to thank all of you for engaging and opening up your lives to receive the word. For some of you, for the very first time, laying foundations in your life, and for others, going back to your foundations to make sure that your foundations are firm. We are all about knowing God and making Him known, and we believe a firm foundation is so critical to us living out that life authentically and in every single part of our lives. So thank you again for leaning in and leaning forward. And don't forget to still continue with our Bible reading challenge of reading the New Testament 3 times before the end of the year. I hope it's going well for you. And if somewhere along the line you got discouraged and you stopped, no better time than today to restart your commitment reading the New Testament. Now, secondly, I also want to applaud us as a church, as today, right now, as you're watching this, at least if you're watching on Sunday, the 26th of November, we are out in the streets for our Do Something initiative. This is a Sunday where we close down our Sunday service and we actually go into the community to serve. This particular Sunday, we are serving the Havens, the baby Havens. We're going to be out in West Florida and in Windsor East, and we are going to be serving the kids, planting grass, painting jungle gyms, and also doing massive cleanup and bringing supplies to those two beautiful communities. You, as part of this Every Nation Bryanston family, are part of giving 2% of our monthly income to the Havens. We've been doing this for 3 years now, every single month since we launched this church plant. And so I want to thank you for your generosity. Now, as we move forward, I want to let you know that next week we start a brand new series. It is our Advent series, leading us all the way up to Christmas and a week beyond that as well. Our Advent series this year is going to be titled A Weary World Rejoices. How I know how weary the world is and how desperate the world needs joy and rejoicing. And so I look forward. Some of my friends are going to be coming to share the word with us and lean in that series as we make our way towards Christmas and get to hear the word of the Lord of hope, of joy, and of love. But before we get there, today is not like going to be our normal Do Something Sunday online experience. Normally, what we do, we have a whole sermon lined up for you that we get from Every Nation family, either in the city or most of the time around the world globally, and someone sharing a message from there. But what are the chances that as I record this is on a Thursday afternoon, that our president of Every Nation released a video today called A Cry for the Poor. And in the video, he actually speaks about baby and child haven, the exact same havens that we are going to be serving on the 26th of November, right in a few days' time. So I thought to myself, as much as this video is not a sermon, as much as this video is not a teaching like you're used to, and is more an encouragement, more a encouragement to let our ears hear the cry of the poor and our eyes see the needs of the poor, I thought it would be apt because truth be told, this right here, this is not the fullness of our gathering. We gather physically together to hear the word and delve into communion together. And so we would so love to see you in person. But for you watching online, I wanted you to get a taste of what we're going to be doing today. As short as this encouragement is, I want to plead with you to listen closely, to let your ears hear the cry of the poor and your eyes see the need of the poor. And if you hear this message, this brief 10-minute encouragement, and you go, man, I want to give to the havens, I want to give to the baby and child havens, let us know down in the comments below, or pop us an email on our Every Nation Bryanston email address. You can go on our website for that, or be in touch with your Connect leader. Let them know. We want to bless the havens, the work that they're doing to serve orphans, to serve widows, and to bless the community, this beautiful community of Johannesburg. So without further ado, I want to encourage you to listen to this brief yet powerful encouragement from Pastor Steve Morrow, the president of Every Nation, as he speaks about the cry of the poor.
A couple of days ago, I had the privilege of sitting at dinner with some heroes of mine. Yeah, missionary heroes, David and Caroline Webb. Some of you know them. And I was at my son and daughter-in-law's home. My whole family was there. And by the time the dinner was over, almost everyone in the room, some of them were crying. Others of us who don't cry, our eyes were sweating. David and Caroline Webb have spent almost 3 decades of their lives in Africa. They're American missionaries to Africa, first in Kenya, the last few decades in South Africa. And they are the founders of Baby Haven. And they were telling the story of how that started and how they have, over the years, over the decades, there have been over 200 babies that have been rescued and have found permanent homes, adoptive families. And they were telling the story of one child who was less than a year old and was put out, that was unwanted, and was practically frozen the next morning and had to really be thawed out and survived and was given little chance of survival, and now as an adult. They were telling stories of another who has been married now and having children and wanted to go back and tell David and Caroline, thank you. And other horrible situations that they nursed these babies back to health and found homes. Some of them that have not been adopted, they're raising these kids. And just listening to these stories, something happened to me that I didn't understand it until a few days later. I read Proverbs 21 and verse 13. It's the text I want to focus on today. And here it is. Whoever shuts his ears to the cry of the poor will also cry himself and not be heard. And that phrase, the cry of the poor, and I think it's what happened to me as in fact, every time I'm around David and Caroline, I hear the cry of the poor through their stories, through their testimonies, through their ministry, through their prayers, through their expressing the needs that they have and how we can come along, many of us can come along and help support those needs. But the phrase, the cry of the poor, and I wrote prayers in my journal about, God, open my ear, because it speaks about the ear. There are people who shut their ears to the cry of the poor. We don't want to listen to the cry of the poor. We don't want to be bothered by people who are less fortunate than us. We don't want to have to be put in a place of taking responsibility for people who really can't help themselves. But David and Caroline, their lives open my ears and many other ears to the cry of the poor. And I wonder how often the cries of the poor are there and we drowned it out with Netflix, with Spotify, with random news podcasts, or whatever it is we do, but the cry of the poor is there. As I thought about that scripture, thinking about my time at dinner with David and Caroline Webb, I thought about other times when I've heard the cry of the poor through people, and the importance of God using people to open our ears to the cry of the poor. In 1986, Deborah and I had been in the Philippines for about 18 months. our church was small, it was young, and we were right in the center of Manila's University Belt, and there was a Christian television show. And the host was doing an episode on ministries that were reaching the university students. And it seemed like the host of this show was a very old person, probably younger than I am today. But at the time, when I'm in my mid-20s, he seemed really old. And I was a guest, and I was talking about ministry among the students. And there was another guest on the show, a Filipino pastor who was about my age. And we became friends, and someone I grew to love and respect. His name was Jerome. And Jerome we were talking about campus ministry. Jerome was talking about a little bit about their ministry. They were a brand new church in a poorer area of the city than where we were. And they were talking about their ministry to street kids. And there were all these kids from, I don't know, I'm guessing from about 5 or 6 years old into their teen years who lived under a bridge. It was where they lived, and they were homeless, and they were hungry, and they were helpless. And he talked about their small church filled with students, how they were feeding and clothing and caring for these kids that lived under this bridge. And I heard again the cry of the poor. I didn't hear those kids crying. I heard the cry of the poor through my friend Jerome. And our small church, which was also in a poor area, not as poor as theirs, but in a poor area of the city. And our church was filled with people who didn't have any money. We had, our offerings were almost all coins, no cash. We weren't by any means a wealthy church or a middle-class church or even close to that. And yet when we heard the cry of the poor, we knew we had to do something. And here were kids who were worse off than our church and worse off than Jerome's church. And we started partnering with Jerome for the next years to do everything we could as a church to help take care of these kids. Why? Because we heard the cry of the poor through another person. I heard the cry of the poor about the orphans in Africa through David and Caroline Webb. I heard the cry of the poor Filipinos through Jerome Ocampo. And some of you Filipinos would know he went on to have those massive crusades across the Philippines called Jesus Revolution, and those 24-hour prayer meetings and 24-hour worship conferences and all of that. And Jerome has gone on to do amazing things, but still has the heart of the poor at the center of what they're doing. I thought about a number of years later, a few decades after, when our church was larger and more established. There was a medical doctor, and he and his wife were both medical doctors, Joey and Tess Castro, and they felt called in ministry, and they quit their medical careers, and they came on as pastors in Victory, Manila. And Doc Joey was assigned to plant a congregation in really one of the poorer areas of Metro Manila. Our church was very close to what at the time was the largest high school in the world, Rizal High School. It had almost 30,000 students on that campus, and most of them were way less fortunate than most of us. They were poor people. And I didn't know this was going on, but I found out later that Doc Joey and Tess, when they would find these high school students, many of them would only have one meal a day, and they were small kids and hungry. And when Joey found out, he just would reach in his pocket and start buying food for these kids. That went on semester after semester, and providing food for these high school kids, as many as he could. Eventually, in years, that turned into what's known as the Real Life Foundation. And Real Life Foundation, after Joey hearing the cry of the poor, probably the rumbling of their stomachs, and he had to do something about it. But eventually that became the Real Life Foundation, which was incorporated in 2007. And since then, right now, currently, as we sit here, we have almost 1,500 scholars right now, 1,475. When I say scholars, that means we give them a full scholarship through college, 4 years of college that we cover their tuition, their books, their transportation, food allowance, and get these kids through. And then we also have a program where we do the same that Joey was doing for high school. We've had over 800 of these kids have graduated from college, most of the time the first person in their family to go to college. But it came out of, and there are hundreds of partners, maybe thousands we have with Real Life Foundation, people generously helping. But it's because we heard, as it says in Proverbs 21:13, the cry of the poor. I heard the cry of the poor through David and Caroline Webb. I heard the cry of the poor through Jerome Ocampo. I heard the cry of the poor through Doc Joey and Tess Castro. I don't know how you hear the cry of the poor, but it's out there. that their voices are crying out for help. And I pray that God will open our ears to hear the cry of the poor. And as followers of Christ, we will respond in a way that honors God when it comes to the poor. I want to read you one more scripture as I wrap these thoughts up. And it comes in a couple of chapters later in Proverbs 22, verse 9, because the first scripture I read is kind of presented as a negative. If we close our ears to the cry of the poor, then we'll cry and nobody will hear us. It talks about closing the ear, but this one is in the positive. It says, verse 9, he who has a generous eye. So there's this closing of the ear, but there's also a generous eye. He who has a generous eye will be blessed, for he gives his bread to the poor. And there's this idea of the generous eye. And what I pray to God is that we would have as every nation leaders around the world, we would have an open ear to the cry of the poor, and we'd have a generous eye. And a generous eye is like lenses. It's like you put on a lens and now you see differently. You put on this lens. Maybe you can put on sunglasses and it makes it look a little differently. Maybe you put on the right prescription and suddenly things look different. And I pray that we would put on a generous eye. The opposite of a generous eye is a fearful eye, a greedy eye, an entitled eye, an eye and a lens we look at scarcity rather than abundance. There are a lot of ways to look. It is my prayer that God will help us have open ears so we hear the cry of the poor, and may he also give us generous eyes so that we are seeing through the lens of Scripture, through the lens of the Great Commission, and seeing people through the lens of the gospel.
Hey family, I hope that encouragement, that brief word of encouragement really did inspire you to hear and to see, and I hope that you, regardless of what stage of life you're in, can consider how you can give. It could be financial, it could be your presence, and it also could be a gift. We want to bless these communities. Everything you give goes all directly to them. And I am so grateful that you took time today to tune in and hear this beautiful encouragement for us to serve the poor. Remember, that one of the greatest scriptures about fasting in the Bible is actually tied to justice. That a true fast, a true consecrating of self to the Lord, for the Lord, is really deeply connected to justice, doing the work of justice, seeing and hearing the cries of the poor, and that it's not just us having this, utopia experience in our own individual places with the Lord, but it's us being connected with Him in such a way that it profoundly impacts how we treat those who are around us, who have their backs most against the wall. So, with that said, I want to send you with this blessing into your home, your city, your work, your environment, as we do every single Sunday. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord cause His face to shine upon you and be gracious unto you. May the Lord lift up His countenance upon you. And I pray that now, this week, in this moment, in this circumstance, He would give you peace. Now and forever. See you next week.
Day will come, war will be no more. The sickness in our hearts, it will be cured. Gather at the streams of mercy and put our weapons down. Together we'll behold your glory where hope is found. So let justice roll down like a river, His righteousness in ever-flowing stream. And let justice roll on like a river, His righteousness in ever-flowing stream. Nations come from every tribe and tongue, hand in hand as one, hate will be undone. While free righteousness, an ever-flowing stream. Let justice roll on like a river. His righteousness, an ever-flowing stream. Your justice and your kingdom will know no end. There will be a day where love has its way. There will be a place where peace can stand. There will be a day where love has its way. There will be a place where peace can stand. So let justice roll down like a river. His righteousness, an ever-flowing stream. Let justice roll on like a river. His righteousness, an ever-flowing stream. A day will come, war will be no more. The sickness in our hearts, it will be